is amazing. So I'm hoping that all of you feel the energy and appreciation and gratefulness that we can still gather after 40 years and celebrate fandom, friendship, and passion for what I think is a very special franchise that opened the floodgates to Japanese animation in the US. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. And I'll pass the microphone to to Jonathan.
Oh, okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan Switzer, aka Captain JLS. My connection to the world of Robotech comics is largely through the multiple efforts I made through the 90s and early 2000s to catalog, dissect, and discuss those comics, most of which have been wiped from the internet, but it is through picking apart the continuity points of one comic series we'll probably not be talking about today that propelled a little blog I had into the stratosphere for a bit, and I gathered up all of the Robotech comics through. I didn't actually read them as they were coming out, but I wound up very quickly accumulating every single one throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, and it was largely honest to goodness, it was the stories of Bill Spangler here that really just I felt opened up the horizons of the series, in comic book form, and to him I'm quite grateful. But, let's move right along to the.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. So all right. Anyway, you might have noticed that I posted, if you had read some Facebook posts, that Sean Bishop was expected to be here. Unfortunately, he could not make it. He is much California and the virus are affecting that situation with him showing up. So, apologize for what's going on with him, but it's just out of control, and he's doing what he can right now to address his situation. So, we wouldn't expect any less of that. Okay. All right, Robotech Comics. It started out with Kimiko, based in Norristown. Okay, Norristown, PA. Not Norristown, California. There was one, but and they started off with Super Dimensional and Macross #1 before Robotech was a thing, really. And then when Robotech became a thing, the very next issue of Macross was Robotech, the Macross Saga #2. And they adapted so many of the episodes, or all the episodes of the series, that aired. And various teams covered the three main sagas: Macross Saga, Robotech Masters, and the New Generation, which honestly sounds like a knockoff of a certain show about space being a frontier and all that. All right, we can agree on that. So,
of course, it came first.
Right, true. Anyway, with that third saga, let's see, Bill, how would you rename that? I could see you've had quite a number of stories or things happening during that era of Robotech. Would you? Robotech in New Generation, maybe perhaps not the best title for it. How would you how would you call that portion of ROBOTECH?
Well,
Your preferred term?
I have a particular fondness for the new generation adaptations. This was written mostly by Mark Joplin, and
Right.
I'm not sure who were the artists during that period, but those were my favorite of the original Amigo comics. But I collected them as I found them at that point. I didn't dedicate myself to getting complete runs until I got the job writing. I didn't dedicate myself to getting complete runs of the comic until I got the assignment to write Malcolm and Operations.
Right. So, but when it comes to like maybe renaming that part of the series, would you go for like ROBOTECH Invid Invasion or ROBOTECH, like, would you say like, oh, I would rename that third saga like something else? Because I sort of recall that you preferred a different term for it, instead of just new generation.
Wow. Yeah, Invasion would probably be closer to the mark. I mean, and Tim Eldred and I, of course, did Invid War, which was the prelude to the new generation.
Right.
And it overlapped with actually a good portion of those episodes. So Invasion would work well.
Yeah. So. Yeah, speaking of which, so Kimiko's covers are right there. So would you say like what they did influenced you quite a bit when it came to your own stories, Kimiko stuff, and how did it?
Well, by the time I got the assignment to work Mountain Town, I had seen the complete series 3 or 4 times, but it wasn't on TV anymore in our market.
Right.
So I worked primarily from the comics and from the McKinney novelizations for source material. And to a certain extent, ROBOTECH Art 1 had a lot of background material that I could use.
So, and it was pretty, it was a great thing to just keep ROBOTECH in people's minds, in comic book shops and so forth. Because that's how I found out there were ROBOTECH comics, because they made it into the shops. Jen, were you very much like just aware of the comics, the Kimiko books?
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I started doing the adaptations in the summer of '86, and I don't know what issue Kimiko was doing at that time. Do you have any idea?
Summer of '86. Well, they were mostly monthly. Although they sometimes would be bi-monthly for a couple times out of the year.
As I recall, the Kimiko comics were coming out every 2 weeks, but it was a different issue of a different series every 2 weeks. So it would be Macross, and then Masters, and then New Generation. Nothing became monthly until Masters and New Generation ended, and then Macross became monthly because it was the last one standing, because it's the longest series.
They were really important to me because at that point I was burning through VCR machines, because I was just, I put a machine on pause. You know what happens? You can put it on pause for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then the tape's getting screwed up. So the comics were really important because they just gave me a static image that I could work with. And I remember someone started sending me Comico comics from South America. They were translated into Spanish, and I found out that Robotech had a big following in like Chile and Argentina, which was really interesting. And I don't know whether they ever dubbed the series, the animation. It'd be really interesting to hear it in Spanish. But yeah, I eventually amassed all the comics. I have them somewhere stashed away.
Yeah, it's back in the '90s, when I had my first ROBOTECH website, and set up, and there's a page where people are encouraged to send me a message and so forth, and I got many messages from South America, just south of the border, and it was I was really impressed with just how much of the appeal it had, and
I think South American fandom is still pretty active. You can still find, for instance, videos of people performing. Look Up the Sky is Falling.
Yeah.
Some of the soundtrack they took on YouTube.
Sure, yeah, some just great music videos put together by ROBOTECH fans who have to have singing ability, musical ability, and yeah, so it was just a really terrific thing. It's caught on, beyond just the States. And now I know the graphic novel had a direct impact on the novels, the very first book, and so on, and it's, as well as Bill's work. For instance, when it came to the novels by Jack McKinney, very first chapter, starts off with Zor thinking about fate and destiny, and having programmed Zor's ship to head for a very distant planet that we're actually living on. So, but the graphic novel. Tell me, Jim, I know Brian wrote the odd number novels, and you had written the even number novels. How did the discussion go with incorporating ROBOTECH graphic novel into the books?
I'm a continuity guy. I believe that like anything that was germane to ROBOTECH should be part of the series, should be part of the act, which is why I incorporated Bill's stuff into the book too. I mean, I just thought anything that was out there, if you could make it feel seamless, it would be important for continuity. I've since learned that continuity doesn't mean anything because it could be overwritten, thrown out, stomped on. But at that point, Brian and I were keen on just bringing everything we could into the adaptations. And so, yes, Brian did, what happened, the way we did it, we split it out, where Brian would be, we were on a crazy publishing schedule where we had to deliver a book a month. So, Brian would be working on book 1, and I would be working on book 2 simultaneously, and then when he finished his book, he would give it to me, and I would give my book to him, so we could edit each other's work and try and find a common voice. But it was pretty crazy, and we did rely on the comics quite a bit to get us through those periods where the VCRs were working.
All right, thank you. So, well, it said that canon doesn't mean what it used to mean. Studying Star Trek novels for one time. So,
It was
yeah.
really fun with Star Wars. It's canon for like 5 minutes until somebody decides to change it.
Yeah, right. And then, anyway, Bill, now, when it comes to this graphic novel, certain scenes such as, since you've written about Breton quite a bit, you've incorporated the whole, him losing an eye to an Invid shock trooper, annihilation disc, and So do you feel similarly about continuity in general, or there maybe some differences in how you regard it, or do you think, oh, maybe you did, okay, this was established here, might as well use it, or what?
Well, yeah, in a general sense, my feelings are like Jim's. I wanted to keep everything as seamless as possible, and I tried to use as much from the graphic novel as made sense when we did Return to the Cross, and trying to explain the early stuff from the Zentradi viewpoint. I think this is a whole different panel, so I'm not even sure I can say this, but I think for me the graphic novel now is important because it shows the scope of the story that ROBOTECH is and the range of the characters involved. I don't think we're ever going to see a live action film now, but if we were, I would think the graphic novel would be where you want to start to show a general audience, okay, this is the range of the story, and this is the range of the people involved. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take with this. Graphic novel can, in a way it's a prequel for sure, but it can be its own film. It can be expanded on or just adapted to a movie. It certainly has certain elements, and I know Neil Vokes, who was the penciler on the book, is a big horror fan, and correct me if I'm wrong. Weren't there a few horror moments as Global and T.R. Edwards and Voker and others were, like Dr. Lang, were making their way through that ship? I feel like it has opened up some more possibilities of what you do with ROBOTECH. And ROBOTECH itself has so much going for it in terms of like an amalgamation of I think different genres of stories. Because it's got mecha battles, it's got just a military sci-fi thing going forward, incredible designs, but characters, love triangles and so forth, and that, to the extent that maybe no one anticipated or even wanted, but it's part of ROBOTECH and the broad humor and so forth. Working some cool neat horror moments, I think would be interesting.
Bill wrote several sort of horror moments into those Return to Macross issues where the Zentradi are encountering all sorts of weird stuff in space.
Some good artists helping out,
Making great work out of some of the grotesqueries he was putting into those stories.
Was that something that you were trying to do, Bill?
Well, what I found as time wore on is I was getting harder and harder to come up with good enemies for the Zentradi and the Solo. It's hard to come up with an enemy for somebody who's 60 feet tall, We began to play with stuff a little bit. There's a 4-issue series called ROBOTECH Warriors, where basically I recast Reti as Ultraman, and he's defending this civilization against this mad engine scientist. And what I was just about ready to start working up a new direction for me at any rate, when the Academy books the license got shifted to Antarctic. I wanted to try and work up more about the Zentradi caste system and how the cloning system works. They kept talking about how the Zentradi were clones, but obviously they didn't know what they're like. So what does this mean in the long run? I had introduced a couple of names, and in the last couple of Centrality adventures that I would hope would set the stage for this. Basically, what I was leading up to was that there was an earlier version of Retard who was already out there, had gone rogue, and was making trouble for everybody. It was like I say, which I thought was a different approach for Centrality villains in any case.
Now I want to read it. All right, guys? Anyway, let's see here. Funny thing about Kimiko and the novels is that they started cranking out comic books, adapting the episodes in the same year the episodes aired, right? 85, right? And they were very beautiful in what they were doing and having them coming out on a very regular consistent basis. Like Jonathan said, every 2 weeks get a new ROBOTECH comic. For a great while until Macross with the more episodes to be adapted or just by themselves. And then along comes Jim and Brian with their novelizations and their very demanding schedule to finish writing a novel each month. Was that right, Jim?
Yeah, each month. But they were adaptations. It's not like writing an original novel. I have all that material right in front of me. I just had to. Brian and I just wanted to give it a little bit more depth, as per Carl Masek's suggestions to us, that we really try and turn it into a science fiction epic. And it's interesting because as we went on, it was funny in the beginning. Like here we are writing these stories about these animated characters, but they became more and more flesh and blood. It was almost as if it was live action in a way, and so that enabled us to go even deeper in our characterization with heroes and villains.
Yeah, I mean, Flesh and Blood's right. I mean, I got into comics through superheroes, and they certainly have a charm, in terms of just, making what they do seem very cool, and it's very dependent on the artists and so forth. Whereas something like ROBOTECH, it's about human beings. It really is about human beings, superpowers. And I recall that in one of their novels, Rick Hunter, in the seventh book, he's like on the ROBOTECH factory looking down, and as if he was some superhero on a satellite, like headquarters, like the JLA. He did that without mentioning the JLA, but I'm thinking Jim just probably referencing the JLA. But
I wish I could remember.
Yeah, but I recall that. Go ahead.
I just want to jump in for a second. When you talk about fleshing out the characters, so I want to stay on track because we're talking about the comics.
I know, we're talking about the comics, not the
but
comics.
but I think that the way that Bill, you really dove into, for example, Supreme Planet Leonard's kind of psychology. And that made it into the novels. But I almost wanted to just maybe ask the question, or was about the epigraphs in the novels, because Jan Morris was just a random contestant in its Macross. But all of a sudden she starts writing about Galactic Guardian, Solar Seas, so it's like, how did this vapid model become this mystical person writing new age stuff? And so you talk about making an adaptation, but at the same time, a lot of original stuff was created. Last but not least, I apologize, but I showed my girlfriend To the Stars because I wanted to show her Lisa and everything. And that last scene where they run into the bridge and Captain Global's there and he's turning on the lights, looking at CF1. In the novel, it talks about how he wraps the whole crew together while Lisa's an injection pod. That's nowhere in the cartoon, but you wrote that, and that made that moment where they're turning on everything emotional. So that was more of a gush, but I do have a question ultimately, which was, where did the epigraphs come from?
I think in the back of my mind, when we were first meeting with Carl, And Brian and Carl were real science fiction fans. I mean, they had a lot in common. They had read a lot of the early science fiction, and at one point, Carl was saying we should try and make the adaptations like Dune. I mean, it was just brief, but I think it must have stuck in my head. And so while I was writing the first novel, I thought maybe we can expand on this, make the story even bigger by bringing in these nonfiction reference books. And I think in the end we had 66 different books that were quoted from. And a lot of times I would start writing an epigraph and give me a whole idea for how to attack a chapter. So it just happened, just fortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's they really do have a lot of depth, and that ties into what Bill was doing with Knocked Uprising. I'll get to that in a moment. But right here, Kimiko, like I guess the point I was trying to make was about the scheduling between the comic schedule and the novel schedule was that you and Brian, like when you had adapted more episodes than the comic book in time, and then Kimiko, when they finally come out with the final issue of the Macross saga, it's been like a year and a half to 2 years since Doomsday, the novel, came out, which had adapted the last 3 episodes of Macross. And then Kimiko, right here, here's evidence of them adapting what you had written for Doomsday. It's
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, look at this. It's like
That's pretty funny.
It's a respect. You were using the comics as reference at the outset, but you outpaced them,
I outpaced
and
them.
then and then later on, I mean, it's even earlier than this that that stuff from the novel starts seeping into the Kimiko adaptations. I'm pretty sure there are some captions in earlier issues that are basically just copy-paste.
Right. But
There was an adaptation. They started to adapt or do comics based on the sentences for a while.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think it ever came to an end.
It never really did.
No, they never finished adapting
They were
Norman Brian's Sentinels books. They started deviating here and there, but yeah, here it is, that very heartbreaking bridge cruise scene that you wrote in the novels. Is telling Jonathan, it's like it is, in my mind, one of the most moving moments in the ROBOTECH period. Whether it's novels, animation, comics, anything or whatever, it's just and Kimiko comic, they did what they could within a 22 to 25 page comic. It's not the same, but it would certainly improve the story for the comic book adaptation. And so I just wanted to point that out.
But when I read Bill's comics, that opened up a whole other notion to me. Like, there are all kinds of side stories going on here that can be told. And so, I mean, the books that came after End of the Circle were all sort of those side stories. Just that there were plenty of places to kind of fill in. And I credit Bill with that, with getting that going.
Yeah, it certainly did, because as with ROBOTECH graphic novel, it provided us with a brand new ROBOTECH story, that wasn't an animated episode, and then, John and Jason Waldron, they came out with ROBOTECH New Sentinels adapting, John Kinney's Sentinels books, well, John and Jason Waldron weren't the original writers, but yeah, when they became the writers, they were still very much adapting the books, and introducing more.
The Sentinels comics, the Sentinels comics are interesting because if you really dig in, the early issues are very clearly, because Malibu Graphics, Eternity Comics, they did publish like 2 script books of the Sentinel scripts. And if you take a look at those and take a look at the very early issues of the comics, they're clearly adapting those first. But these comics came out at such a glacial pace in terms of the story. They very quickly started, Tom Mason and Chris Holm, who were editors at Churning, started filtering in, first of all, their own ideas. If you read the wedding special two-parter, that's almost entirely their own original material. There's a ridiculous sort of Scooby-Doo plot of Edward's trying to ruin Rick and Lisa's marriage before it even begins. And then, but then very much, almost around the time they get to Tyrol, yes, then it becomes very much the Jack McKinney novels. Again, with further embellishments.
Well,
Jack.
is that where the scripts ended? Like there were
No,
scripts?
no, there were still scripts after that.
There
But
were 65 episodes planned. Right?
there were 65 episodes planned. I believe there were 65 episodes written, but
There were scripts for 65.
I know I had treatments for the last hour.
That's what I
I'm
thought.
positive.
That's what it says in ROBOTECH R3.
Oh yeah. Tomorrow though, and then at the novel panel, I'm going to bring. I've got Carl Masak's original Sentinels plot points books about this thick, where he outlined the entire 65 episodes, and anybody who's interested can take a look at that. I mean, it's pretty amazing. You know,
I'm
he
very interested in that.
Yes, I mean, it's pretty extraordinary because he had to try and sell this to get financing.
Oh, of course.
So he just like created this incredible saga
Mhm.
taking place around Tyrol. I mean,
Right.
you'll be really interested to see it.
Yeah, so, anyway, to expand on what Jim was saying, give credit to Bill having, like, show different ways of, different new areas of exploring Robotech. Bill's first work is from Malcontent Uprisings, and there's this great two sentences in this poster that are too small to read right now, but I will tell you. Everyone thought the first Robotech War had ended. Everyone was wrong. I just feel like that's a strong way to sell this story. And then Bill just, he comes out with something that's, I feel like, was in a way maybe taking you out of your own maybe perhaps comfort zone, or just because of the nature of the story you were telling. Because it's, it is very much a, full-blown conflict, if not a war that's going on. And, you introduce some extreme elements with Max, having to take out his entire with a rock, might be nice to try that, by the way, and so forth, and certain atrocities being committed on this destroyer. So Bill, what sort of like fed into that direction?
There were a couple of things that fed into it. Primarily, I wanted to come up with something that felt like a major story that gave us a major new way of looking at Robotech, without saying, well, okay, this has to be a parallel timeline. It would still fit in the original Robotech timeline. I think I was appealed the idea of working at the conflict between the Zentradi on Earth and the humans on Earth was something that appealed to me as well.
Well, you've written comics before, such as Alienation, and I do remember maybe a parallel or two that you had brought up between that work and this and Malcontent Uprisings.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Like Alienation, there's a few themes or
Alienation,
that have in common with Malcontent Uprisings.
Yeah, Alienation was very definitely an extension of Malcontent Uprising in terms of some of the themes. Although it was a different set of different environment and a different factors at work. I sometimes tell people if alienation was still running today, we wouldn't be having the problems we have discussing immigrants. You know.
Yeah, right. Because people are coming from their own culture, and then you have humans, you have centrality, two different cultures, and what happens when they're so different to this degree? It's I feel like it's what you were exploring with uprisings.
Well, the thing is I don't know. I like to talk about just the idea of respect. I mean, you know, people talk about how, well, you can't understand what I went through. Well, no, I can't, but I can respect it. And that's why I kind of, you know, that was one of my themes. Most of you probably heard this story to one degree or another, but I'm going to say it again. When I introduced the idea of what happened between Leonard and Savoy, I didn't know how many gold would buy it, but I was never given any objections or things that said that this had to be changed. That they just said go and do it. Now, I don't know for sure, of course, but I like to believe, you know, that ROBOTECH at least vetted this, you know, at least passed on this. One of the things, you know, one of the things that keeps coming up about Malcolm and uprisings is whether or not this was a fair characterization of Leonard. As I mentioned to you earlier, one of my big references of ROBOTECH Art 1, and I know you know this story, but Leonard's biography, ROBOTECH Art 1, starts with the sentence, and I told Leonard was a pathetic bigot. I figured I could work my way up from that, no problem. You know, I tried to give him a little more motivation for what happened to him, and why he acted the way he did in ROBOTECH Masters.
Right, and you know, I also think, having known certain personalities in the fandom, finally meeting them for the first time, it's Leonard's depiction of both Bill's work and then the novels has been a bit controversial. But I think, you know, the way you used them really goes to the fact that when you have a planet full of humans that were maybe and still numbered in the billions in the ROBOTECH timeline, and they were wiped out by an alien race, you know, billions of them at least, and you still have a great number of them left. A lot of them are not going to be all that kind to, you know, what's going on with this, you know, what remained of that race of beings that are still living on our planet. So I think Leonard, this depiction really kind of feeds into that, and you know, and in terms of just having that kind of viewpoint being presented. In any case, but and then you have this map of the Southlands here. You had worked on that projection further, and you were always very forthcoming with your ideas with this period, not the uprisings period. And so yeah, there's a bit of an introduction that you've written there, and it's also some really exciting things with Mecha, the Stingers. So yeah, please, even though I might have asked this before in previous times, how did you come up with the idea for the Stinger?
Well, it was a simple thought that I wanted to introduce new mecha so that there would still be visual variety in the mecha. which I hope would help keep people's attention. And I thought the idea of cobbling up together things from different sources made sense in terms of what the Zentradi could do. I know.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, yeah, you can have an active band called the Scavengers, and it's totally on point. You make do with what you have around you, and you got string mecha parts, you know, in this, you know, battlefield that is Earth, you know, and malcontents make use of it, great use of it, and yeah. So you focused on certain characters that may not have had so much of the limelight, such as Baxter, such as Jonathan Wolf, and you even have them working together, which is, I thought, was a master stroke. You know, so then you go into detail about Jonathan Wolf and other elements of this period through, you know, these great text pieces. So how much, or did epigraphs have any kind of influence on this idea, or was it maybe perhaps other comics, like Watchmen comes to mind in terms of great text, long text pages and so forth?
Well, it basically came from really liking the epigraphs in the novels and wanting to do something like it. It was really that simple. I have a particular fondness for, you know, what I call fake documentation, you know, books that don't exist, documentaries that don't exist.
Yeah, we did too, for some hours.
And you know, and as we've talked about, and we'll talk about tomorrow, undoubtedly, the one kind of played off of each other. I know there's a scene where I talk about Jonathan Wolf going through the wreckage of this abandoned department store, looking at this weird jumble of mannequin pieces, arms and heads and things like that. And I know you use that too. It was a nice image.
Yeah. Anyway, like, honestly, the legacy of this title is branched off to other, to the more recent comics. Even though this show is really about what I think we can agree on is the golden age of ROBOTECH, which was in the 80s and 90s. But I'm only doing this one bit because honestly, Bill asked me to. and then I thought of it, hey, no, why not? Why the heck not? Because the new Titan comic that had come out, ROBOTECH Rick Hunter, all right, we have the scene with Vince Grant, who's been fleshed out much more than he's ever been, I think, really. Who brings up this conversation, or brings up this thing that he heard about Leonard. Because Leonard he's not being cooperative. He's not giving the RDF the resources they need to fight certain Zentradi in the storyline. Okay? And Leonard ends up, Vince Grant ends up saying to Leonard that, I heard something about this affair. Actually, a number of officers, human officers were involved with females in Zentradi, and I know from Jim's Zentradi Rebellion, he had established that at least Dr. Penn, Karen Penn's, father had an affair with Zentradi, other than Leonard having an affair with Zentradi. So yeah, that book actually, brought up a couple of things one thing from that Bill directed and wrote, and people wrote into this saga, and then part of what Jim did. But this whole affair started in Malcontent Rise was established there, and here is Vince Grant using it as leverage, telling them, it'd be a shame for this story about, you and this Zentradi woman, becoming public. then Leonard says, okay, what do you want? What do you want? What resources do you need? And so, anyway, that's just a really neat thing. And were you surprised, Bill, when you saw that?
Well, I was, yeah, I would say it was a mild surprise that he incorporated it, but he did a really nice job on that. One of the things that, that's still, I want to still respect it.
Yeah, it's I was impressed. Just by by that, and but in war, Jonathan Wolf is used again. And then you get to play with other toys, such as Nova Centauri, right? Lancer. So how did that come about? And John Carpenter as well during the war.
Oh, we were just going to very boring, so I'll keep this short. John Carpenter was a character I think that maybe you guys named.
He's in the TV.
He's in the TV show. Yeah.
And first it just seemed like kind of a call out, but as I could find more and more to do with him, and in some ways he's kind of my identification figure in Infant War. The character I understand him as a guy basically just trying to live an ethical life and trying to decide what he needs to do.
Right, thanks. And anyway, okay, so let's open it up to the audience. We do have a little less than 5 minutes, but let's try to work in a few questions. Who has a question for Bill? Anyone who asks a question will get a t-shirt. This very t-shirt. ROBOTECH Timeline from the Animation Comics Comics and ROBOTECH Novels support the true books by the original authors.
Are you gonna take that off? We get that
No,
one?
no. I got it. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna do a talk show style.
Hey, Bill. A lot of folks here know that I'm a huge fan of comics. I have, I think, one of every issue of all of them. But as a comic fan and just as a Robotech fan in general, Invid War and Malcontent Uprisings are held up as two of the best examples of comic book writing in Robotech. And you took, for example, with Jonathan Wolf, you took a character that was in one episode and made a whole story about how he went from being a hero to being the villain. And I want to know, like, what's your thought process, or did you have any idea that when you were writing these stories, these original Robotech stories, based on existing characters, that you would have that big of an impact? That we would be here talking 40 years later?
Yeah, sure. Certainly I didn't know what type of impact I would have. I like the idea of tracing Wolf's very beginnings and talking about some of the things that Jim and Brian mentioned in the books, his strained relationship with his wife and his son. So no, it's just kind of, well, God forbid I said organic. I'm sorry.
You can use it.
Yeah. Thank you. Are you a large or a what? Extra large?
Works for me.
Large? Okay. All right. Who may have a question as well?
For the Canadian.
For the Canadian.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So you stated that they would play like basically
yeah.
the first five episodes
Sure.
of New Generation.
Yes.
New Generation. Where the hell was this in Canada?
It was Atlanta, Canada. So if you lived in Nova Scotia, and I know it's time to go, so if you lived in Nova Scotia, you were deprived, but that deprivation created a more intense love for Robotech. Great question. You were deprived, but it ended okay. I'm gonna end this on your behalf. Is that cool? Like, because I think, yeah. I want to thank everyone on behalf of everyone, especially Bill especially Jim, Jonathan too, for making time. And please give them a round of applause for giving us the time. Thank you so much.
Plug the next panel.
The next panel tomorrow is on the novels, right? Correct.
Yep.
Novels at 11:45.
Yep.
11:45, we will keep this conversation going. We will talk a bit more about, well, Bill's contributions, his comics, and we certainly will talk about the novels. Yeah, and these two gentlemen will be there. So, yeah, we'll keep it going for the second half, and hope to see you all there. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys for coming.